Since the rise in inflation and talks of us now being in a recession or possibly a depression, it's been very hard for the finance grifters of YouTube to scam people with their terrible stock picks and horrible financial decisions, but bless their hearts, they're still trying. Now, a few weeks ago, I exposed Andre Jick's terrible home purchase for $1.3 million that he wanted to rent out, and as I showed, no one wanted to rent his property, and he was desperately cutting the asking rent price week after week to try and get a tenant. Now, since I made that video, Andre has since changed the listing, and you can no longer see the asking rent price on any of the house search websites. Andre, who presents himself as a financial expert on YouTube, does not want you to know that he made a horrible real estate purchase. Now, in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Shelby Church and her nearly $1 million rental property disaster. If you've never heard of Shelby Church, she's a YouTuber who started out with a more daily life type content, but over the past few years has transitioned to more business type content, as that's where the real money on YouTube is. She currently has 1.75 million subscribers, and with that large of a following, she has a massive influence, and hopefully she can learn not to peddle terrible investments like a nearly $1 million rental property that turned into a nightmare. Now, in Shelby's defense, she has been much more transparent about her home buying mistakes compared to Andre. Much like with his magic act, Andre likes to hide the fact that he's a horrible investor who makes terrible financial decisions who shouldn't be listened to. So with Shelby's case, it's refreshing to at least see her show the slow downfall of her home buying decision, even if in the beginning she presented it as an amazing deal, an easy way to make tons of cash. So Shelby, along with her twin sister Monica, decided to buy a home in Palm Springs, California, and use it as a short-term Airbnb rental property. Now, there's a lot to unpack in that statement, so let's break it down. The first mistake these girls made, in my opinion, was buying a home in Palm Springs. If you're unfamiliar with the area, Palm Springs is located in the middle of the California desert and is a quiet retirement resort community for most of the year, with the exception of springtime when Coachella and Stagecoach Festival are held just outside the city. During this time, the festivals collectively bring millions of people to this area, and hotels and Airbnbs can make massive profits. However, outside of these few months, it's not a very visited location, which Shelby found out the hard way when over the summer her guest reservations dried up, and she only received one visitor in the month of July.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it, you guys. We lost money. It's not looking good. Okay, July. We had one renter. One. I changed the names of these renters, by the way, to protect their privacy, but these are fake names. Karen, Patty, Molly, all that, totally fake names. So we had one renter, only 3 nights were booked out. So they paid $1,500, we got $1,106. Obviously, this is not enough to cover any of the expenses. Like, it's not even enough to cover the utilities, probably.
Now, this is hardly surprising, as over the summer, Palm Springs regularly hits 108 degrees, and on occasion can soar to 117 degrees. No one wants to be in Palm Springs during the summer, so obviously her first mistake was purchasing a home as a rental in an area that has massive swings in when guests want to stay there, and many months with almost no visitors. The second major mistake Shelby made when purchasing the home was that she had no real estate experience and didn't do a proper home inspection before purchasing the property. Within days of buying the property, the sewage pipes began to leak into the home, and they eventually had to get a new sewer line installed. Now, all of this could have been avoided if they had done a proper home inspection before purchasing the property.
So the first thing I wish I knew before buying this house was to get a sewer scope done.
Within the first week of owning this house, we started running into all kinds of plumbing issues. And this all could have been avoided or dealt with beforehand if we had just gotten a sewer scope done before we bought the house.
Within the first 3 days, this sink had already backed up and we had to call a plumber to fix it. There was toilet water all over this hallway. This bathtub became filled with water that had been in the clay pipes.
And it was all because of the roots of these palm trees right here. So what happened is actually pretty common. The tree roots from our palm trees grew into the sewer line, and since we had old clay pipes, it was pretty easy for those roots to get in there. So a sewer scope is basically when they run a camera through your sewer line to see the condition of the pipes and if there's anything blocking them. And turns out our pipes were super old clay pipes, and they had a lot of roots growing through them, and that's why we had problems just within the first week. You can get the roots cut out, but this is really just a short-term fix. We ended up actually having them dig a trench and putting in a new sewer line, which cost a few $1,000s.
Now from there, the situation got much worse as the girls were then unhappy with the aesthetic of the property and decided to completely redo the backyard without any real knowledge of the cost it would entail. This would be costly, and their total backyard renovation came out to a whopping $76,000.
So here's a look at the backyard before. It is a really big backyard, so it has a ton of potential, but overall it wasn't really the aesthetic we were going for. It had a lot of plants that weren't native to the desert. I've already shown it in a video, but just a refresher in case you haven't seen what it looked like. This is what it looked like before, and we had big plans to just do a major overhaul of the whole thing. Here's a few more photos to show you what it looked like in different areas. After touring, I decided to kind of make my own rendering. So here's a before and here is an after of kind of what I was thinking of doing. So taking out a lot of these random plants, adding some lush ficus trees, making the concrete one uniform color, and then doing something to the overhang to make it look nicer, or just getting rid of it altogether. I estimated to achieve this it would cost $30,000, and boy was I wrong.
On top of that, they also did improvements inside the home and decided to splurge on new furniture, spending a total of over $30,000 on furniture alone. Now, I want you to keep in mind, this home they bought was purely to be used as an Airbnb rental property. They weren't living there. This is an insane amount of money to dump into a rental property, and Shelby did eventually realize that after the fact, that they probably should have been more patient and waited for a home in the area that they wouldn't have had to dump so much money into renovating. In total, the girls spent $171,000 renovating a property that they had spent $752,000 to purchase in the first place. Initially, they launched their Airbnb during festival season and initially made a whopping $15,000 in the month of April. After expenses, about half of that was profit. However, things quickly turned sour when the summer season hit and the bookings dried up. Now, Shelby slowly seems to be coming to a realization that this purchase was not a smart financial decision and will take a massive amount of time to recoup their investment based on current Airbnb trends. Now, ultimately, I think she will be fine since she is a multimillionaire thanks to YouTube. However, the problem is that her initial videos on this purchase, and she's made many of them, presented her decision as a wise business move, and I'm sure a portion of her audience became interested in doing the same thing because of her videos. Unfortunately, this deal was a disaster, and while people like her and Andre Jick can just replace the losses with ad revenue, many of their followers who possibly follow in their footsteps don't have million-dollar YouTube channels to dig themselves out of a terrible financial decision. This ultimately is the real problem with these influencers. They can make horrible business decisions and will always be bailed out with their YouTube money. In many cases, like with Andre Jick, these people are horrible when it comes to finance and stock advice, but because they have massive followings, they are looked up to as experts in the field. If Andre Jick, Shelby Church, or Meet Kevin tried to do many of the business moves they did without the backings of their millions from YouTube, these folks would go bankrupt. These people are not experts, yet sadly, millions of subscribers treat them like they are.